Back, everybody. Last week, I'm sure you guys missed my beautiful intro, so I'm gonna prepare an extra special one for you guys today. The NBA never sleeps, even after the Nuggets won the finals. Um, you have Bradley Beal. He got traded to the Suns. Really exciting move. A lot to talk about with how the Suns manage their depth going forward and what the Wizards are thinking, what their philosophy is, because they just traded Porzingis as well now. So that it's really interesting to talk about. John Morant got suspended, so we'll talk about what that means. And as always, sure you guys love our summer series breakdowns. We'll jump into the AFC South. So with that, roll the intro and let's get it started.
Okay, guys. Hope you love that intro and the intro music as well. Let us know if you want us to update it. It's getting too stale or something like that. But anyways, welcome back. Christian, how was your weekend? Did you do anything fun?
Uh, just chilling, I guess. Saw a movie, but you know, here to talk
Oh,
some
did you saw
sports.
Spider-Man?
No, I saw The Flash.
Oh, Flash. What do you think?
I thought it was a pretty good movie. The CGI is pretty bad, but I think acting and like the overall story itself was pretty good. But yeah, I like going to the movies, so when I can, I go.
Yeah, same. I'm sure you heard this from everybody and your mother, but the new Spider-Man movie was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I saw it about a couple weeks back, but I just looked at all the animation styles and I was like, wow, incredible. And I saw the Flash one. I didn't watch it. I know a lot of people have speculation on the actor playing the main role in that movie, but um, I haven't seen it. I'm not really a DC guy. I'm more of a Marvel guy. But I did see Secret Invasion today. Kind of thought that was interesting. Over the weekend, I watched the U.S. Open of all things. I didn't find myself getting into golf, but I did. Saw Wyndham Clark win, hold off Rory McIlroy. That was a ton of fun. Felt bad for Fowler, but that was a good watch. And then recently been watching baseball. I thought the Sox were going to let me down yesterday. They were about to blow a lead when Kreese went out. I don't know why they took him out that early. He was on a roll, but somehow they pulled it off. It was a questionable base run hit, but I thought the umpires were right. So um, at least they're not getting swept by the Rangers. Can be happy about that. But all right, let's get into it. So on our first news of quick notes, um, I do want to mention that we had talked about Lionel Messi on the podcast last week, but said the deal hadn't been finalized yet. I believe he's taking a vacation right now at the moment. So he's kind of like playing it off casually, not looking to join the team anytime remotely soon. But as far as the details go with um, Messi, he's signing with the Florida International in the MLS. I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think Messi or Ronaldo would even sniff the MLS, but here we are. What are your thoughts on Messi to Miami?
Um, yeah, I think I mean, it's pretty crazy. It kind of reminds me of, when Beckham went to MLS and then Ibrahimovic, he went to MLS, and there's just like a lot of hype there. I think I heard or read somewhere that, MLS tickets that have Messi at least playing in the game have just like skyrocketed. And obviously the deal, I know portions of the deal, at least off the top of my head, and like, it sounds crazy. It literally is like an MLS deal to get Messi and not just, the team trying to get Messi themselves. And I think that's just like mind boggling for me, just to think that that's how us, the whole sports organization, I guess, a whole league is trying to get a single player just to boost popularity.
I mean, yeah, and on that note, I know we had mentioned it, I think last week, but we had talked about it off air on the podcast, not sure. But Messi's following like quadrupled after that. No, sorry, no, Florida International's Instagram
Yeah,
quadrupled after that move.
yeah.
And I found that absolutely wild because obviously everybody loves Messi. Messi's one of the world's greatest players. He's right up there with Ronaldo. I'm not going to get into the debate right now who's better. Frankly, I only watched soccer during the World Cup, so I wouldn't give a good, accurate take on that. But I don't think Messi's done. He's not aged out. I think he's still got plenty in the tank, and I think this is going to be a boost for the MLS because it's going to boost the talent, the young guys coming up. Everybody wants to learn from Messi. I think this could be obviously it's really good business when Messi's there, but I think after that, you saw the international team for the U.S. do a lot of good things actually from the previous World Cup. They're on a roll. Next time they're playing, they're going to be in New Jersey and New York, that side of it, and that's going to be super exciting. I think this is a good move for U.S. soccer because it's not looked upon well like internationally compared to other countries. So I think this can only be positive for both business and also players coming up in the soccer world.
Mhm.
Literally right after we recorded this podcast, I think it was the day after, Bradley Beal, he ended up getting traded to the Suns. I was like, oh, dang. It happens to us all. Like, it happens every single time. Like, yeah, after every episode we upload, something new happens. And then we're like, oh, wait, guess we have to put it off to the next podcast. But what did you think when you saw this move on both sides, the Suns and the Wizards?
Yeah, I just know that I just remember like looking at social media and everything, and like everyone was saying that Bradley Beal is not getting traded. It's like it's just part of that off-season talk, and I'm like maybe, but yeah, but maybe it was tricky because like everyone was saying it's like the prime time to have traded him was like a few years ago, right before he signed his mega contract that he has now, and I think the big question I think people had for this trade, at least going to the Suns, was like just continuing to load their offense, which inherently it's not a bad thing to have a bunch of offense in the NBA, but it's like when you already got proficient and elite scorers on your team, it's like, is this the best move for your team? And obviously the Suns think so, but obviously that's left up to, I guess, how the season goes. But yeah. And then I don't remember exactly what the compensation was. You want to like just say that real quick? If you know.
Yeah, I have the compensation right here. So I'm reading this from Sham Shanaria on Twitter. But the Washington Wizards are trading 3-time All-Star Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and a handful of second-round picks and multiple pick swaps. I think the only reason there weren't like first-round picks included in the compensation is because the Suns didn't have any. They already used them up for the trade for Kevin Durant. So I think they didn't have enough to give to the Wizards or any to begin with. But that's the compensation details.
Yeah. And so I think, in return, they got a decent package. And I think because of like, I guess, the players involved in like both sides of the trade, I feel like it can be hard to warrant, I guess, a first rounder, despite obviously, Phoenix being kind of a late first round type team just because, they're a good team. But yeah, I think that I don't know, like a lot of people said, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people are pretty strong on which side lost this trade, but I think that this has pretty decent potential at benefiting both teams. I don't think it's a big move, but it's not like a league altering move is kind of how I look at it, at least.
I think it's going to be league altering if the Suns adjust their depth, because right now, if you're looking at their roster, no analysis needed. Their starting point guard is going to technically Cameron Payne. I don't know if he's testing free agency or not. Then shooting guard is Devin Booker. Shooting forward would be Bradley Beal. You kick Kevin Durant to the power forward spot, and then you have DeAndre Ayton. And between the 4 stars on that team, including Ayton, they make up for, I would say, I think 163 million or 165 million. And that's just not enough cap space to fill out your depth space. So I would look for them to either trade Ayton to get solid rotational pieces to build around that offensive arsenal they have, or like sign veteran minimum contract players, or like just pick up undrafted free agents off the litter and then hope that the players they have like pull a Miami Heat within year 1 or year 2, because it's a lot to ask. Like, this roster is currently constructed without depth, just insane 82 games. You need the depth, and I think if anything, they didn't learn their lesson from the Nuggets by doubling down on offense and not enough on depth and defensive and rotation players that could truly complement what Kevin Durant and Devin Booker do. I think this is a good move offensively, obviously. Like, if you're telling me you're getting Bradley Beal as opposed to the older the pieces they traded off, I think it's an upgrade. But the Suns do have a lot of questions to ask. Like, does their front office know what to look for with the depth pieces? Because I don't think they'll have enough money to keep Cameron Payne. I would hope they get Torrey Craig back, but there's a lot of like solid wing rotational players you can grab. You just have to be savvy enough to get them at the right value because you went with this move.
Yeah.
So it's either that or trade Aiden. I wouldn't give up on Aiden just yet. If it were me, and I would try and really hammer down the scouting part of it. But realistically, with the money sense, you can't hit on everybody. So it's a very tough move for the Suns as far as depth. For the Wizards, it's very interesting because you have basically like a salary dump with Chris Paul. They're planning to move him elsewhere. Kyle Kuzma's not coming back. He's going to cost a lot of money in free agency. And then they just traded Kristaps Porzingis today to the Celtics. So I think they're in full rebuild mode, but they have a couple pieces I like. I like Johnny Davis. I like Denny Adida. I totally butchered his last name there. And you have Monte Morris, who I really like, and Kendrick Nunn, who I really like. So you have some pieces there, but they're not going to knock your socks off at all. Like, you need more. You need draft development pieces. So I think they're headed to a rebuild this year and next. We'll see what happens. All right. Moving on to the next topic, we got Ja Morant. He was punished by the league office. He's suspended 25 games next season. I have the full details here. So for the 2023 and 2024 season, because of his conduct detrimental to the league, he'll be required to meet certain conditions before he returns, and will be illegible for any public league or team activities during the suspension. So it could be more than 25 games. That's what that tells me. And the reason he was suspended is they found him posed with a gun in a live stream video on Instagram in May, after serving a suspension in March for showing a gun in an Instagram video shot at a Denver area nightclub. And obviously, from the first point I mentioned, his suspension could exceed 25 games. And the commissioner specifically said, for Ja Morant, basketball needs to take a backseat at this time. So that's all the minutia on that. What is your take on what this means for the Grizzlies and for Ja Morant?
Yeah, I thought the punishment was probably going to be longer, just with just being like, I guess, a second offense with this type of, I guess, misconduct. I mean, wasn't the first one more so like a team suspension that they did, and then this one's like an official league suspension?
It started out as a team suspension, and then I thought the NBA got involved.
Okay.
It was a little bit of both on both sides.
Yeah. I'm just like wondering, I guess, like, what's up with his mental, and just thinking like what is he trying to like prove or show to other people? Because I mean, like, he's like, I guess, quote unquote, trying to act like tough and street and whatnot, and like what is the point of doing that? Because I feel like people that kind of come from those more difficult backgrounds, they try to like show that they're above that kind of way of life, and then you have Ja, who comes from a good family, a good community, good school, and then he goes out and he's like, oh yeah, I'm not blessed in life. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if you don't want to be blessed, then like, I guess you don't have to play in the NBA anymore. But if it was me, I'd probably want to play in the NBA and be cool that way. But it's just me. I don't know about Ja.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cases where he does really need to self-examine what he did, and then ask himself, is this helpful to the team? Is this helpful for my career? Is this helpful to my family? And I also think you have to look at the influences around you, because while it's cool, like, you got to recognize yourself and your star status in the NBA. Like, everybody wants to hang out with you. Everybody wants to get a picture, video of you, just to say, oh, I saw Ja Morant. I took a picture with Ja Morant. He's that kind of name brand, and he's special in Memphis. Absolutely special. He's somebody you come to see play every game because you don't know what he's going to do on the floor as far as like basketball ability, because he's like Kyrie, where he's like a showmanship in a different way. Obviously, Ja's more athletic. He's not as skillful, but his highlight reel of dunks is amazing, absolutely amazing. His passing ability, his playmaking, absolutely elite already. And I find myself disappointed seeing this because I think the more important thing that means is like for any NBA awards, like All NBA awards, MVP awards, like first team, second team, that kind of stuff, and then defensive ratings, any of those awards. He's not eligible for this because he wouldn't have played enough games. So I think for the financial incentives of this definitely hurts him, and he's looking for a supermax contract this upcoming season. So having the suspension definitely doesn't help, and I think it's going to cost him. So unfortunately, that's the reality of it. Um, I I would like to see the Grizzlies like plan ahead. I know Tyus Jones has been balling out, but need to have a future at point guard while Ja's suspended, because I don't think you can rely on him to be consistently a point guard at this rate. I'm not saying give up on him. I'm saying you got to do what's best for the team and really make sure the depth of your roster can sustain a suspension like this, because this is more than a quarter of the season. This is a significant part. And you want to make sure your team chemistry with or without Ja is on point. So, and good that the league was stinching on this. They were strict on this. I personally would have liked to see it stricter, but when I saw that it would limit him from getting team awards, I thought the ruling was fair. Anything else to add on that?
No, not really. I feel like we covered most of it. I mean, just him acting pretty stupid. I feel like we can say that about him, just potentially throwing away his Kirby's if, he doesn't learn from this, continues to get
he's
suspended.
definitely thrown away millions. You're right. Yeah.
It's kind of sad to see, but he does him. Anyways, moving on, right?
Yeah. Let's move on. The brighter topics. We got a lot of NFL coverage. Yeah, I know the NHL draft and NBA draft is coming the next couple of days. We just don't know enough of those about those players right now to talk about them. We might touch upon the landing spots potentially, but we're really focused on the NFL season that's coming up, given that there's a large gap between the NHL and NBA. So for right now, we're going to talk about the AFC South. So starting with which is, I found it pretty interesting because I think we had a difference of philosophy on like where these teams are headed. Mm-hmm. But with the Jaguars, I think it's a breakout season for them. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot to like about what you saw from them when they ended last season, because I believe they ended the season 9-8 last year in the first year of Doug Peterson, and they ended up losing to the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round. But in both the regular season game and their playoff game against the Chiefs, it was nip and tuck, and they're right there with them. And then you add Calvin Ridley to the mix, and I think that's really the cherry on top to that team. So without further ado, I'm going to show what I think about the Jaguars, and then where Corsian serves in that, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss. All right, so now what we're showing you is basically our schedule-by-schedule breakdown of the Jaguars and where we stand. I have them going for potentially a conference winning 14-3. I know that's a Super Bowl take by me, but Corsian has them 11-6. And Corsian, when you're looking at these matchups week by week, where do you see this team stand amongst the rest of the AFC conference?
Yeah, I do see them as one of the better teams in the AFC, and like at 11-6 here, I believe I have them winning their division just already. Mm-hmm. And I mean, with this record alone, there's obviously games that I think they might win that I have them losing, and obviously there's, you can flip flop. I think this is a phenomenal team. They do go against a lot of good teams, which is, I feel like, just the hardest part for them. Just AFC is a loaded conference, and I mean, I have them, I guess, losing to the Saints, which is kind of an anomaly. They're one of my randomly can win a game, randomly loses stupid games type of team. And so, yeah, but overall, I think, yeah, they are a strong team. My biggest, I guess, concern is just, or not concern necessarily, but their biggest weakness is just the fact that the other teams in the AFC have a lot more experience being as like a unit together and I guess just dominating for multiple years compared to, they kind of started kicking it into high gear at the end of last season. And it's just trying to make sure they keep that momentum going into this upcoming season and just trying to dominate their games that way.
Absolutely. And you're completely fair on that. I think a lot of these teams that I picked them to win, especially when I'm looking at it, I gave them the win against the Chiefs. I gave them the win against the Browns. And I'd have them beating the Titans twice. Whenever you're facing a divisional foe, it's no like sure thing that you could win both of your games. So I think you played it safe with having them split, but I can also see that happening as well. So I think 14 wins is definitely their ceiling. I don't think it's their floor by any stretch. I don't think you can say any team's floor is that with the gauntlet of AFC teams like you mentioned. But I definitely think this is a team on the rise because if you look at Trevor Lawrence's statistics, he threw for 4,000 plus yards. That's true, right? If you look at his touchdown to interception ratio, it's basically over 3-1. He had 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and with the sack rate, where he has 27 sacks in the season and a 95.2 rating, I think the addition of Calvin Ridley is going to elevate that offense even more where you see Trevor Lawrence make less mistakes. He's not going to get sacked as often because they're invested in him as much, and they invested in Tank Bigsby as well. I think those two offensive pieces alone are going to diversify the offense enough where he's not going to be asked to do as much, and he's going to have more options to keep on par with these teams. So it's me being optimistic, yes, but I think they have the ceiling there.
Yeah, and like looking at this, I feel like definitely, your record could be their ceiling this upcoming season. And I feel like their floor maybe is just what their record was last year. I think regardless, they're going to have a winning record. Unless everything, implodes, which obviously I don't think will happen this year. I don't think there'll be a Broncos. But yeah, I think, they do build up on that success from last year. And that's why I have them doing better than what they did last year. And obviously you have them doing better than what they did last year too.
I also think I'm pretty aggressive with how they fare in the division. I think they're going to go 6-0 with their division based on my results that I have, because I think every team in that division is in transition. If you look at the Colts and the Texans, they just drafted QBs. That's going to be an acclimation period with first-year head coaches, mind you. And then also with the Titans, they drafted quarterbacks back-to-back in the previous 2 drafts. They still have Ryan Tannehill, questions with Derrick Henry. They might have DeAndre Hopkins, who might shift the balance a little bit. We don't know yet. But I think just looking at the top 22 players on the Jaguars, this is the first top 22 on the Tennessee Titans. I think the Jaguars have the edge, just talent alone, and with a coach that's every bit as good as Mike Vrabel and Doug Peterson. So I also think it's a product of them being the Patriots in the AFC East when Tom Brady was dominating. And I think they're easily going to win this division. Okay, so now that we looked at the schedule, I'm going to go ahead and jump to their offense, then discuss what we like, and then also what to look forward to this upcoming season. So starting in the 3 wide receiver sets, you have Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley now that I mentioned, Zay Jones as well, Evan Ingram. And then you have their own line, highlined by Cam Robinson, Brandon Sheriff, and Walker Little. Anything to look at with this roster? What do you see from this?
I think this is a pretty solid roster to have. I really like the depth that they have, especially with the running back position and the wide receiver position. I think I hope that they build on, I guess, what they had last year with this O-line. I think they have a lot of really strong key pieces here that can help this team excel. But like you said, they have Tank Bigsby, who I think can be, a great player for them here. And then they got JaMychal Hasty, who had, he had flashy plays last season, and Ernest Johnson, who just seems to do good whenever he touches the football. And so you got a lot of depth there that I like. And then you go into the wide receivers as well. I mean, you go, see Jamal Agnew, who I feel like every year he has like 5 random highlight plays like scattered throughout the season or something. And so, I mean, you're just expecting that from him. I don't know when, but it'll happen. And so I think, yeah, it's just a solid, offense built top to bottom. So, Evan Ingram, he broke out last season. He finally got rid of his alligator arms and decided to catch footballs for once in his career. And so that was good. Hopefully he continues off of that. I know how sometimes players, they have a breakout season and then they kind of regress back into maybe a shell of kind of what they were doing previously. And so hopefully we don't see that from him. But I feel like, I guess that might be your one question mark is, was this last year a fluke for him, or does he build on that success and I guess be, a focal point for this Jacksonville offense for the future?
Yeah, I'm with you on Evan Ingram. I was super shocked by him breaking out. I wish I invested in him in fantasy. I didn't. I stuck on Dawson Knox for most of the season. It was pretty bitter, and I didn't pick him up. But he still, give him credit. He really stood out. He's playing like a veteran now. He understands the technical flaws in his catching game, and I think he addressed it. But we'll see if he keeps consistent with that. I did mention Tank Bigsby. He's getting a lot of buzz in training camp right now, but I think the number one concern I have with him is not with whatever he's showing now. It's what happens when he's in the preseason and in the regular season. Because in college, I noticed in 11 on 11s, he really struggled with decision making and wasn't as decisive. And in the running in NFL, you have to be really decisive with taking the 3-yard gains when they're there and avoiding the 3-yard losses, trying to get 15-yard carries all the time. And I think he needs to clean up that part of his game. I would not be surprised if I see D'Ernest Johnson as a backup on this team, because I think he has the talent, he has the role responsibility, and I can even see him forcing a split with Travis Etienne, where D'Ernest Johnson's taking up the rushing load because he can do it. He's proven he's done it in Cleveland. He's a really good back. So if I'm looking at the end of my drafts for any backups, any sleepers of note, it's D'Ernest Johnson, because he can fill that role. He can do a 3-down role if need be. So really look at him. I like what you mentioned about the wide receivers. I'm not as high on their depth. I thought they had better depth last year. I wish they kept Marvin Jones, because he was a really good, solid rotational player for them. We'll see how Parker Washington does on that team. He's going to be really the difference maker on whether they have solid depth or not. But Jamal Agnew is a good scheme player you can use in here and there. But I think having it headlined by Calvin Ridley is going to make Trevor Lawrence's life a lot easier. So I like the O-line. I like the fact that they have Anton Harrison as depth. I think that's huge for them. I don't know much about Ben Barst or Luke Fortner, but I really like the rest of the pieces that they have there. So we'll see. But overall, great top 11 on offense.
Yeah, and then kind of going even further into that wide receiver group, even though it may not have the same depth that I guess you had last year, you do have, Evan Ingram, who's a tight end who can practically line up at wide receiver. You have Travis Etienne, who is a running back who you could practically line up as like a receiver in the slot. And so if you really need that depth at that receiver position, I feel like the Jaguars are more than comfortable, having Etienne run out on the slot and maybe even Evan Ingram on the other side, and have Tank Bigsby kind of be a running back in that spot. And, there's a lot of really interesting, I guess, different personnel that this team can throw out on each.
Casey can also catch the ball as well. Don't forget about him.
Yeah. And so there's like a lot of players that can move around, which I think is what makes this offense so dynamic and can make them, compete with the likes of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Philadelphia Eagles. And so there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, you're definitely right. They have a lot more options, like a lot more headline front options, like compared to what they did last year. I think Calvin Ridley's the best receiver on that roster they had compared to last year. So I think just that additional loan is huge for them. Let's move to the defense and the special teams. When I look at this defense, there's not like you don't see a Derwin James or Jalen Ramsey on this team, but it's a lot of like solid to good players on this team, and they did really well last year. They're extremely underrated actually too. While I'm looking at their statistics, just talk to me on what you like from the defensive end numbers.
I really like their cornerbacks that they have.
Okay.
Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams, they kind of broke out last season and kind of, I guess, helped gel this defense together, I guess. Because I mean you have guys like Devon Hamilton who, he broke out last season as well, but then you have Josh Allen who's kind of looks like he's kind of like the focal, I guess, star power on this defense that you have. Devin Lloyd, he's not too bad. He's pretty solid, but I think the fact that Campbell and Williams broke out last season really, I guess, helped elevate their game later on in the season and kind of helped them get that, it was like a 5-game win streak I think they had at the end to kind of push themselves into, I guess, the spotlight of everybody. And now everybody's talking about how, like how you're saying, they could win the AFC just because obviously their offense is phenomenal and they have a lot of breakout players last season on defense. And I'm assuming, everyone's staying together. And so, you kind of just push that success forward and just kind of build on it all and have another good season there.
Yeah, I was looking at Oluokun, who's their right side linebacker on the depth chart right now, and he actually had the most tackles on that team. Yeah, everybody would think Josh Allen's the best player, but statistically, looking at the tackles and who got the tackles, and the tackles for the loss particularly, it was Oluokun. He had 184 total tackles on this team, and the next person closest was Rashawn Jenkins with 112. I'm sorry, Devin Lloyd with 115. But you look at this team, and they're just solid all around. Roy Robertson-Harris was amazing for the Bears. He had 3 sacks last season. Like you mentioned with their defense, like Andre Sisco, he had 3 interceptions, and Tyson Campbell had 3 interceptions as well. Even though Darius Williams didn't have any last year, he was a really solid player outside of Jalen Ramsey on the Rams, and I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. Then you got Trayvon Walker, who's only going to get better. Josh Allen's the front liner. Everybody's trying to stop him. And I look at this team, and their front 11, just like their offense, excellent. And then you have Caleb Chason, really good edge rusher. And I'm looking at this team, and I'm like, I don't see many weaknesses on their top 11.
Yeah, because I mean, like you're saying, like Tyson Campbell, like he didn't have the interceptions, I guess. It was Tyson Campbell that didn't have
Darius
the picks,
Williams.
Right? Darius Williams didn't have the picks, but he allowed like a 68.7 passer rating throughout the season, and like that's a pretty crazy stat to have, just as a guy who probably most NFL fans don't know about. And then like you're saying, I can't even say his name, Foye Sade Oluokun. He was their tackle leader.
Good.
He stepped up a lot last season in their pass coverage. Obviously, he has room to grow there still, but he is one of the captains on that defense for a reason, and we saw him step into that role really nicely. I think the biggest hope you have is for Trayvon Walker to, I guess, step it up in year 2. I guess he didn't have the season that you'd hope for him to have had, especially just with, I guess, the other pass rush talent entering the draft last season. And so I feel like, if anything, he's probably the biggest weakness on this team because, I mean, he's supposed to be your elite pass rush, elite run stopping kind of player. He had a good, like, week 1, I think, but kind of after week 1 and 2, he kind of fizzled off almost and was kind of just a there type player, which is obviously not what you want from a number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, but you also have to remember, he is a rookie. He's not gone through like this process of like you have the combine and then you have the draft process, you have the media interviews, and then all of that's taken away from like the off-season training time with their team. And I think going into when they got bounced out of the playoffs early, this is his first time having this much of downtime to really work on his skill set, really work on his athletic traits, his technical traits. He's getting all of that right now. So I think the ceiling for him is only going to go up. And then, just as a rule of thumb, like whether you're playing offensive fantasy or you're playing IDP fantasy, and you're thinking about what types of sleepers should I invest in, you should invest in the second to third of your players, because that's when they'll start to understand where their technical gaps are and do their best to address it so they can be more productive. And they, in turn, more productive than not if they take their game seriously. So he's a player to watch on this defense, because he can absolutely take this team from where it is right now, where it's underrated and good, to great and one of the best in their conference and NFL. So a lot to like about this team. I have really high hopes. I think they're going to finish as one of the best teams in the conference. Obviously, I think that's their ceiling, but I think this is a team that's definitely capable of making the playoffs. Alrighty, let's talk Indianapolis Colts. Now, this is a team that's been trying to find the quarterback again and again. And they've been sticking it in the mud with any veteran QB you mentioned. Like, first it was Phillip Rivers. Then it was Carson Wentz. Then last year was Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan ended up throwing 3,000 yards, yes, but he had equivalent touchdown to interceptions, basically 14 to 13. And I think the biggest outlier that was a reason why the running game wasn't as good, and despite of that, Jonathan Taylor still had 860 yards, mind you, is the sack totals. The 38 sacks allowed by their offensive line. They had injuries all over the place. And this is one of the teams I thought that would be really good last year, and I was completely shocked that they weren't. What did you think about? I know obviously you weren't as high with them adding Richardson, but with adding Gardner Minshew, do you think this is a team that's still in like that win now mode, or you think they're still on a developmental rise now with Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, well, I think they have a lot of good pieces on both sides of the ball, and so I think, if Gardner Minshew, he starts off hot like he has shown, I guess, in the past, he can play good football, and the Colts commit to it and ride on it, I think they can make a solid run this year. It just, again, the hardest thing is just the AFC is a hard division. There's a lot of elite teams, and so I personally didn't have them winning that many games, but if we get Gardner versus the Cowboys after like basically a year of playing as like training with the second team, then that you probably have a good year with the Colts here. But I think the Colts are definitely trying to rush Anthony Richardson into the spotlight. They drafted him high for a reason, and so we'll see how that happens. I mean, again, I don't think he really like his tape, I guess, is mostly highlight tape and like not consistent tape is what the big issue is with Anthony Richardson. And so can he, I guess, consistently be his highlight tape, or will he just kind of be what Florida fans were excited to have leave their team? And so we'll see what happens with the Colts there. But here are our fun little prediction.
Yeah. So I think both of us don't have them having a winning season. I think while like I was really, really high on Richardson, I think he has the high ceiling of all the rookie quarterbacks. I'm trying to be realistic here too. It's his first time in the NFL. The one thing he does have is inexperience. He is mature for a quarterback with that experience. I'll say that, but that's not going to translate to wins his first go round. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Gardner Minshew does. But they just have a really difficult schedule, like you mentioned, because they have the Jaguars, then you have the Ravens, and then you have the Rams, the Titans, the Jaguars, and the Browns, all four at once. And I'm finding it really hard to see them having a winning record after week 7. And I think you had them at 0-7 to be, in fact.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a period of transition, because they do have a first-year head coach in Shane Steichen. There's a lot of new changes that have to take place in order for them to find the chemistry on offense, even though their O-line is coming back, JT is coming back, Michael Pittman coming back. there's a lot that needs to be like built up. So I think both of us don't have enough confidence in this team through our schedules, and I think we got their floor and ceiling correct. I would say maybe their floor is a little bit lower than what we think, but there are definitely some winnable games here.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess technically this team won with like Jeff Saturday as a coach for a game or something. And so, I mean, like, they have pieces obviously that can win. And so, yeah, but I feel like this is pretty realistic for just looking at their competition and I guess who is on their team. I feel like they got a couple really good players, but it just, I guess, a lack of a lot of those really good players that hurt them. And so I guess we can go into their roster and kind of just dissect that.
Yeah, and then also you have to keep in mind they're facing the AFC North, which has been like notoriously known as one of the hardest divisions in the NFL to win within the division, let alone like face. And then you're facing a lot of quality teams like the Jaguars within their own division, and then there's a lot of teams like the Colts too as well. So you can't. Well, I have them winning one against the Texans and winning against the Falcons and the Buccaneers. They could easily lose those games as well. But like you mentioned, let's move on to their offense and then talk about what we like. What's to kind of expect? Do you see any weapons here being fantasy relevant or players we should keep an eye on this season?
This year, I guess in terms of fantasy football, obviously Jonathan Taylor, I feel like he's a quality player. You know, he had a down year last year, but I feel like you can't just say at least. I give him the benefit of the doubt of, you know, kind of reverting, maybe not to 2 years ago, but still, you know, putting back or bringing back an elite performance. And I feel like Michael Pittman Jr. might be the next, I guess, fantasy relevant player that you'd have on this team. Again, like on fantasy, I don't think, you know, I'm like racing to go get him per se. I think that, you know, if you go, you know, running back heavy in the draft or something, you're looking for receivers late, he might be a solid option there. But yeah, I feel like this team isn't, I guess, built well for fantasy football is what I can say about it. They draft a lot of their pieces are good for, I guess, probably what their offensive goals are. You know, you got guys like Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, who are like really good situational. Even Michael Pittman Jr. is a really situational, I think, guy that you can scheme open in a lot of situations. And I mean, Jelani Woods, there's a lot of hype around him last season, I know. And I think that he can, you know, build on that hype and build on some of the flashy plays he had last season. And so I think a lot of these guys are really good at, I guess, specific things that hopefully the head coach has an idea for, like in his own scheme and in his own offensive play calling. And so it'll be an interesting offense to see. I think it'll be a really smart, methodical team. At least that's how I would coach this team if I were a head coach looking at this offense as a whole.
Yeah, I love to see the French fries duo still on the team. That always makes me so happy. Wesley French and Mo Fries. If you haven't seen that meme of them two standing together with their last names, French fries, absolutely love to see that tradition going over here. But speaking on the offensive line, I really like what they have. I just wish they could stay healthy. I think that was a huge reason why Matt Ryan got sacked so many times, and why Jonathan Taylor wasn't as effective. I think that alone is going to help the young quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew. I just look at the overall skill positions players, and it's very young. It's a very young team. So there's going to be a lot of like headaches to go through if you're a Colts fan. As far as this team goes, I'm really excited about Jelani Woods because he has a lot of athletic traits, and him being at the starter position now in the depth chart gives me hope for what he can do. But if it turns into a 3 tight end rotation with Kylan Granson and Mo Ali Cox, I would not be surprised because they're equally as athletically talented as well. But I think if there's anybody to invest in right now, it's Jonathan Taylor. I think he's still worthy of a high first-round pick. I wouldn't give up on him. He's one of the best running backs in the league. I wouldn't say he's better than Nick Chubb, but I think he's right up there. If you say he is, I wouldn't argue with you. He's a great talent. But I think what this team is missing is like a true number one wide receiver because I don't believe in Pittman exactly like that, like you mentioned. He can do some things, but he's a very situational player. Okay.
Yeah. And like
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And obviously, like, I think when you think of, like, I guess, like, in Madden terms or like fantasy terms, obviously you want that number one receiver. But I feel like, I mean, this is the type of team that I feel like could make not having, a number one true dominant receiver work. And I mean, like, I guess a technical example of this is, I guess, the Patriots with Tom Brady in their later years. Obviously, no one
Yeah.
in the quarterback room here is Tom Brady, but
Yeah.
I mean, if you're expecting Anthony Richardson to be a superstar quarterback and be one of the faces of the NFL, then you're not necessarily needing the rest of your roster, or at least the rest of your skill position players, to be as stacked. When you have elite running back, you have an elite quarterback that can make plays on his feet, and so I think this is a safe, I guess, team to help develop Anthony Richardson as well, in the fact that he can't just take deep shots, which he may be comfortable just launching it down the field when his offense, frankly, maybe Alec Pierce isn't too bad at that, but like, I feel like it's not necessarily the strength of this offense, which is probably good for his development.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a trying year for this team. They have some positive pieces where they're going to have like really high ups, but they're also going to have, you're going to also have to ride the downs as well. So it's not a strength of this team that I'm going to rely on, but if you look at their defense, it's still very, very good as far as talent. They still have Shaquille Leonard on that team. And whenever you have him and then DeForest Buckner leading that front seven, I think it's going to be extremely huge for this team, like on what they rely on and what they win by. I love Pay. I love Buckner. I love Stewart. I love Ode Yingbo on that team. And I love their depth. And then you look at the rest of that front, rest of the back seven, and you're just like, wow, this is a really good defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and this is like why I was saying that, like, this could be a potentially like surprising team that could make a potential playoff wild card-ish run. It just, if everything falls together, if they commit to Minshew Mania and he, I guess, gets traction with this team, then I do think that this defense will be a really key part in, I guess, them trying to make the playoffs if they are in a position to do so. I do think that maybe the secondary, while having good players, might be the weakness of this defense. I mean, I feel like either it's like a lack of experience or just kind of, I guess, lack of size to an extent that I see as the biggest issue in the secondary, at least. And so I think that whenever they play teams that are like a strong run-oriented team, they can have really good success against that. But a team like, I mean, if they go with a team like the Bengals, the Seahawks, maybe even the Steelers, that Browns, that have a lot of receiving talent on that offense, seem like the ones to tear apart this Colts defense. And I think that's where they see most of their struggles, unless they either trade for someone or one of their guys, I guess, takes another step forward. Because obviously they had Stephon Gilmore last season, who was kind of that big superstar key player on that or that secondary, at least. And so losing that sucks. But they're in this really weird phase of, are they rebuilding? Are they taking a few years to develop? Or are they really going to try to make the playoffs? And it's a mess. But I think it's really rangy on how well this team can do.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But I think at the same point, like, if you're Chris Ballard, you can't keep relying on veteran QBs to try and carry this roster forward. You tried it for 3 straight years. So he's kind of like really in a tough situation where it's like, I need to find a permanent answer. But the way I've been trying to find it hasn't worked. 3 times I tried it. So this is him trying to say, hey, this is the QB I'm sticking with. And it's going to be a long process, but I think at the end it's going to be worth it. So I don't think they're gunning for 2023 by any means. It's not what their philosophy is headed.
Yeah.
But with that said, I know you mentioned the secondary is a weakness, and I don't think it's a bad thing to say, because I look at their front seven and it's loaded. But I look at Kenny Moore; he was just in the Pro Bowl. Like he's an all-star slot cornerback. So I think if they really ride that hand, like take away the slot and then force teams to beat them with the outside receivers, they have a shot, especially if they have the pass rush to get there. But they have very little margin to error on that defense to make up for just like the lack of inexperience on that offensive side, not to mention the quarterback experience.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so probably not the news you were hoping for after the Jaguars team memo, but it's our realistic take of where we see the Colts. I think I don't know about you, but I think the Houston Texans are in a similar spot. Now that they added C.J. Stroud to their team and they added D'Amico Ryans, one of my favorite head coaching hires this cycle for the 2023-2024 season. Of course, where do you see this team when you preview them?
Yeah, I think this is a surprisingly well put together team. Obviously, they have like holes as in like every, I guess, bad team that was in the NFL, but I look at, I guess, some of their pieces and I feel like they're like probably just a better version of the Colts almost. And it's like, I think, obviously, I feel like Stroud is just more complete of a quarterback. And while maybe his ceiling isn't as high as Richardson is, I do think his floor is a lot higher. I mean, almost every quarterback that was taken like first 2-3 rounds maybe had a higher floor than Anthony Richardson, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that he has shown that he can play good football. They have good pieces on the offense. They have good pieces on the defense. And I think that, if Stroud really finds his groove, like, I mean, it's not common for quarterbacks to, break out their rookie season, but we do see, quarterbacks some quarterbacks here and there put on a show on their rookie year. And I think that if Stroud can do that with this team, because there are pieces, I think that you can see them go far, but again, they still do have a lot of holes in holes on this team, which can lead to struggles throughout the year.
Yeah, I'm really excited about John Mechie coming back. And I really liked what Dameon Pierce did last year for this team. I know I had him in one of my fantasy leagues, and I love what he did, but I think he was also like a talent I wasn't expecting to show up. And he showed up in a 3-down role for this team, which is really rare now in the NFL where you have like a bunch of two-back splits. I believe Devin Singletary's on that team now, right?
Yeah, he's on this team too.
Yeah, so when you go in there and you add more depth to the running back position, and then you already have Davis Mills, who's a competent quarterback. So something happens with C.J. Stroud and his developmental process. You have Davis Mills who can offer some starting caliber play. I just don't think he's on the high end QBs. He's a sleeper though from the 2020 draft, if I believe. But if Stroud doesn't start week 1, I'd be shocked. I think he and Bryce Young should be starting day 1 on their teams just because of like the talent level. And like the Colts, like you mentioned, I think it's going to be a team where they're going to have some struggles in the beginning just because of inexperience. Like John Mechie is coming back. C.J. Stroud just got started. Nico Collins still has to mature as a receiver. He's still got some things where he can work on. And I think it's going to be a year where they're going to have to rely on Dalton Schultz a lot. Like as far as like leading the offense, not necessarily just statistically, but just trying to grow as an offensive like philosophy and relying on him to be the safety blanket when the big plays aren't there. Especially when I think the number one knock on Stroud was he doesn't take the deep shot as aggressively as Richardson, but he makes the right like schematic decision every time. So now it's a question of, okay, when he goes to NFL and the windows are tighter, is he going to force that throw or is he going to wait for somebody to be wide open? I think that's the only thing to worry about him. But when you have RPOs and stuff where you can scheme people open, is not as much of a big deal. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like the biggest, I guess, scare for this, or my concern, I guess, is, I guess, inexperience from the coaching position where, it's a lot of new for this team, and having an inexperienced coach with a rookie quarterback, I guess, can be really tricky, for many various reasons. And so if the coach isn't, Ryans isn't up to the task of, I guess, being a good coach, then obviously you kind of see a mess like the Broncos did last season with a new quarterback and a new coach. But yeah, I hate Nathaniel Hackett. Anyways, moving on to the record.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like you think that's the case though, based on their record and based on what you think of Ryan's against these other
Mhm.
teams.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned they look like they're in a better spot than the Colts are, even though they're in a similar spot, and that's indicated by you giving them wins against the Colts in both their games.
Mhm.
Um, I also think it's a product of like I think we have their floor to ceiling kind of correct. I could also
Mhm.
see it where their floor is as low as 4 wins.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see them in the range where they're not going to have a winning season, but they're going to be close to it. They're
Mhm.
going to be right up there. Um, it's just a product of them facing the AFC North, and then they're also facing the Jets, the Browns,
Yeah.
and the Broncos, all teams that we expect to be much, much better.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a hard schedule for them
Mhm.
relative to where they are versus
Yeah.
other teams.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I think I agree with like the fact that with the idea I guess of your record being their floor, maybe like 1 or 2 games they lose additionally, but probably 8 and 9 likely being the ceiling for this team, which would be a tremendous I guess comeback, coming from what they had last season. But yeah, I mean I look at the pieces they add in the off season and I guess key pieces that they've retained last year going into this year and just I guess building on whatever I guess successful players or developed players that they had, which I'm pretty excited for.
Yeah, and then like we mentioned, I'm a little bit positive on when they face like the Buccaneers and the Panthers and like the Falcons and obviously Arizona that they can win those games. But you do have them sneakingly in a couple wins, like against the Saints, the Titans, both times.
Hmm.
So there is like they do have upside as a team, even though they're young.
Hmm.
But with losing Brandon Cooks, let's take a look at what their offensive depth chart looks like, and then what kind of pieces we expect to be like significant during this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I look at like at least bare minimum the starting the starters on this team, and I like where they're at. Like obviously there's maybe like a few guys that you wish could be better, but I look at this and I'm like, this seems like a solid team. See, obviously we're expecting CD Stroud to be at least decent. I mean, rookie years are hard for quarterbacks, but you know, I think that he is a talented player. He goes through his reads, at least from what I've seen from tape, and you got a two running back set. Mike Boone was like the number 2 running back for the Broncos last year with Melvin Gordon, which isn't really saying much, but
I thought he
he
was
was.
underrated. He should have got some more time, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like the Broncos had a messy backfield last year with, Javonte getting hurt and then Melvin Gordon not playing so good. And then Mike Boone got hurt at one point and then everything was just a mess. But anyways, yeah, so I think, the starting running back, I like Dameon Pierce. I think he had a really good break tackle rate last season, which is incredible to see, from a running back that wasn't necessarily talked about much until, I guess, after he was drafted to the Texans and there's hype around him during training camp. But you have a lot of young receiving talent, which I like. See Nico Collins, he had a pretty solid year last season with I guess how the Texans did. John Mechie, obviously he's coming back, which will be huge. Robert Woods, he had a down year last year, but you look at who's throwing him the ball in Tennessee. You had Malik Willis for like half a year, Josh Dobbs half a year or something, and like who's who's succeeding with those 2 quarterbacks? It's like it's hard to be good when you. I think he was dealing with a little bit of injuries, and then 2, you might have had the worst quarterback play behind the Broncos last season. At least in the latter part of the season. But then they got Nathaniel Dell, they got Xavier Hutchinson. I do like Noah Brown a fair amount. Amari Rogers on this team actually. I didn't even know that, but I feel like they have I guess decent depth at receiver too, but what do you think about the receivers?
I really love the receivers, actually. I think this is one of the deepest receivers, like 7 deep. I think this is really good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like 4 of them are young, and they still have actually, I should say five or six of them are young. But this has a lot of potential. Um, if you know me, you've been following along and leading up to the draft. I'm really high on Xavier Hutchinson. I think he was one of the sleepers in my class. I think it could be a number one wide receiver, future number one wide receiver for this team. So I think definitely having Robert Woods on that roster is definitely going to benefit all these young guys a lot. Amari Rogers changed the scenery from Green Bay. Nathaniel Dell is really good. He has really good route running. The only issue with him is just like he's undersized and not at the weight that you expect for prototypical wide receivers. But I don't think that should be a limiting factor if you look at guys like Waddle, the Tyreek Hill, guys like that who have started out as like skinny or small in the league, but they learned the technical aspects of the game and learned how to leverage that and route breaks.
Mhm.
I think he has the potential to be a really good weapon for this team as well. But
Yeah.
the most fascinating thing is beyond the receivers to me. I think their offensive line, the starting five, is like low-key one of the most underrated in the NFL.
Mhm.
I think their guard depth, like with the addition of adding Kenyon Green, like is really, really strong. We got Shaq Mason, Juke Scruggs, and then Kenyon Green, obviously, they got from the draft. And then you have Tunsil and Titus Howard, who are really good bookend tackles.
Mhm.
I think this is the ideal situation for CJ Stroud. And um, while I don't see this offense hitting it off, maybe like the first 5 weeks, just because of inexperience on Stroud's part and then the receivers' parts coming back, this is a confident offense. This is a really confident offense.
Yeah. Yeah, and like this offense is the main reason why I do see them. If Stroud kind of finds his groove early on, I see them, I guess, at what I had as their ceiling, and I think that, yeah, even like going, I guess, back to Nathaniel Dell, he obviously he has like issues in terms of size or anything. He has his issues with size, but I feel like just looking at the overall depth of this receiver core and potential guys they could get in the next couple of years, they made like he probably doesn't even need to be a number one type player. He could be an efficient slot guy or even an efficient number two guy that they kind of just rotate in throughout the season and specific scheme plays meant for him while they have a superstar, maybe wide receiver one or wide receiver two kind of draw targets, or even a solid tight end like Dalton Schultz could kind of create space. And so there's just a lot of pieces that could go in a lot of different spots, which is why I really like this team going into this next season. And I think that even beyond this upcoming season, I think they have a good shot at rivaling the Jaguars if Stroud doesn't suck.
Imagine if Marvin Harrison was on this team.
That'd be crazy.
Oh my god! He's great. Not as great, but Marvin Harrison on this team would make it insane. Like they'd be right up there with all the elite teams, in my opinion, at least offensively speaking. Let's jump to the defensive end and special teams. So, obviously, the Texans had this really crazy trade where people were like trying to discuss, oh, what are the Cardinals going to do with pick number 3? They're going to trade down to a quarterback needy team. All of a sudden on draft day, the Texans just go back to back 2 and 3, and they went Stroud and Anderson, where they see these as the cornerstones. And arguably, like just from that move alone, I think they have one of the best drafts of any team in the NFL. So you have that highlighting your front four. Then you have Malik Collins, Sheldon Rankins, Jerry Hughes, who's a veteran defensive end, always been underrated in his career, backed by Chase Winovich. And then I look at the rest of like the back 7, and I don't think it's bad. Like Derek Stingley is a young star. Jalen Petre is a really good player. Jimmy Ward's been solid in the San Francisco scheme that Ryan's just trying to implement here. And then their linebackers are solid. Tell me where I'm wrong, or if you agree with me.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that this is a pretty solid defense. And I guess, looking at, the overall completed level of this offense and this defense, and I think it's just, I keep on talking about the Colts, but it just seems like they're better rounded than the Colts are. And that's why I believe that this team can be a lot better than the Colts. Yeah, Will Anderson, I think it's crazy they got Will Anderson. Like, I saw the trade and I'm like, geez, like, are you, like, what? Like, I was so surprised, man. And you have Jerry Hughes. Obviously, he's an older player, but you do have guys like Chase Winovich, Jonathan Grenard. He had a good season last year. And so I actually initially thought after the Will Anderson draft pick, it was going to be Will Anderson on one side and then Jonathan Grenard on the other, just because both are younger players that you could develop as just an insane duo on both sides. But if you have Jerry Hughes, he's still playing decently. He has experience, which I guess is really important. But you also have Sheldon Rankins, who I think really, pull this defense together alongside Denzel Perryman. Christian Kirksey has a lot of players have a lot of experience, which I think is a really good mesh for this team of having young guys that they're trying to develop into the stars of the NFL, and then have veteran players that can kind of help guide them or help teach them if that's what they want to do, and to kind of just be better players.
And I look at one of the guys they took, Thomas Booker. I saw a little interview, and just his intellect from a defensive tackle, what he looks for, how the offensive lineman's stands and how he gets off the line. I found it really fascinating how detailed he is from just from a smart scheme. And I find myself looking at D'Amico Ryan's scheme and then him fitting in that scheme. I'm just wow, he would really know what to do next to Will Anderson, or learning from Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins. And it gives me hope that this defense has a bright future, because if we have smart guys like that who are just willing to soak up any information and use it right away and apply it, from guys like Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins, who have been to the league for a long time, I think this is a team that's definitely they're competent. They're competent at top to bottom. Yeah. They're not especially elite in any areas right now just because of inexperience. But look out for this team. I think they have a bright future.
Yeah. And I just even noticed their cornerbacks right now. They're basically 4 deep at cornerback, Desmond King's a phenomenal nickel corner. Steven Nelson, he's not as great, I guess, but he's still, as basically a number 4 type guy, that's a pretty solid player to have there. Shaquille Griffin, he's moved around a little bit, but obviously I feel like everywhere he goes, he still puts up good numbers. Stingley, obviously, he's young. He could potentially be one of the superstar cornerbacks of the future. Just feel like being on the Texans kind of, put him in everybody's I don't know. Everyone kind of just forgot about him just because the Texans were the Texans last year. And I think if the Texans do well this year, I think a lot more hype around Stingley will show up, and it'll be exciting to see. I like their kicker, Kai Fairburn. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, and Desmond King has been a really good returner. Obviously, it's hard to gauge that, when you have a bunch of kick returners, the veterans that are returning. But Nick Caserio did a really good job with his team, especially from the draft. It's not easy to move on from the Sean Watson situation and then try to build a really good roster from top to bottom with what he had. But I think in the short time he's been there, he's done a really good job with his team, even though the Davis Mills pick hasn't panned out. He's a lot of good things if you're a Texans fan. Maybe not this year, but look out. This is a dangerous team that's building something special. Okay. Last division recap for this division. Tennessee Titans. I didn't know what to make of this team. I had them finishing slightly above the Colts and the Jaguars. So I don't think they're going to be the bottom feeders of this division. But I'm just confused. I'm just confused on what direction they're having. You have the speculation on what they're doing from a schematics standpoint. But then, when you hear the news about DeAndre Hopkins coming into the fold and potentially signing with them, there's a lot to look forward on this team. What are you kind of seeing from this team this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think that this team has a pretty good amount of solid pieces. I think a big part of last season was injury. I think that. Towards the end, obviously, when Malik Willis was not playing good football, at all. And so it's really hard to gauge, I guess, what their trajectory is coming into this season, especially with, Ryan Tannehill, he's getting older. He isn't necessarily regressing. He's probably, I think he played a little bit worse last season than previous season, but I do think that it's hard to gauge where this team is exactly because of just a bunch of injuries. But I did like, a handful of the draft picks. I do like a lot of pieces on both offense and defense for this team, and I feel like this is just one of those teams that can win a lot of random games, especially just with Derrick Henry. Just like when Derrick Henry's, he's an unstoppable force at times, and so if you let him gain momentum and take over a game, this team really can win any game. For all we know, if Derrick Henry decided to have energy all year and never get tired and never get hurt, they could win every single one of their games. But obviously, that doesn't seem likely for any player in the NFL. But I am hopeful. I do think this team has a moderately high ceiling, which is like obviously I don't think they're doing better than the Jaguars, but I do see them potentially making the playoffs, but more likely they'll kind of fall short of that. I have them getting third place in this division, but I guess what did you see about this team?
Yeah, I had them finishing second, but like very close to the Colts and the Texans. I think I feel bad for Derrick Henry when they built this entire offense around him, and the quarterback play is good, but it's not like as great. Like if he had one of like the top 8 quarterbacks in this conference alone, I think this team would be like a title contender. But I think I'm struggling because they have Ryan Tannehill. They got far in the playoffs with him. But I feel like if they had a little bit more or a little bit extra, they'd be in the Super Bowl conversation every single time. And it's so hard for me to say that because Mike Vrabel's like one of the best coaches in the NFL. And the way they built their defense and their offensive lines when Henry was rolling was absolutely amazing. And when I had AJ Brown on the team, it was incredible. But I think the absence of that wide receiver one that AJ Brown had and brought, you're kind of hoping a bunch of guys would step up in that fold. Maybe it's Hopkins if he signs. Maybe it's the kid they drafted last year. But I look at these teams and I'm looking at their first 3 games, first 4 rather. You can even expand it to first 6. I'm like, how do they really fare against the Chargers, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens? Because Eckler can be every bit as good as Henry in the passing game and running game. Chubb I think he's better than Henry from a talent perspective. He just hasn't had the volume to showcase that. Jonathan Taylor is also a really good back where I can absolutely see but the Titans either losing that game or winning that game. Like it's really hard to tell. And then you have the Ravens, who we're going to talk about them much later, upcoming weeks, but they have built one of the best offensive powerhouses. So I look at their first 6 games, I'm like, I don't know, man. They have a favorable stretch from like weeks 8 through 13, but after that is a bit of the same. So it's like it's a bit of up and down. So I have them hovering around like 500. I picked slightly lower than that. I picked them at 7 to 10. But like we talked about repeatedly with these AFC teams, they're going to have to be like a majority of the Chargers, the Browns, Bengals, Ravens, Chiefs, Steelers, like Dolphins. It's just loaded.
Yeah, and I mean, I have them having the same record basically. Obviously, wins, losses in a few different spots. The way I kind of looked at their schedule, at least, was I noticed that the Titans, they had a really strong front 7. I might say they might have like a top like 5. I don't know if it's top 5, but like a borderline top 5 front 7. Just looking at their defense, I think their secondary is pretty weak, and so basically, if I looked at a team and it said, and I thought their run game was more dominant part of their team, I kind of have the Titans winning those games. And so you see, I mean, like the Colts, the Ravens, the Falcons, the Steelers, which I guess you could say same with the Ravens. But anyways, a lot of these teams are very run focused. I do have them winning 1 and off with the Jaguars, but overall, I do have them winning against the run-first teams, and then more so losing to teams with stronger, I guess, pass offenses. And so because I just don't think that their defense can keep up with that type of play, and that's how I organized it. But I could see them winning the games you have them and losing the games you have them losing to.
Yeah, I kind of want the opposite pattern. I looked at because when I look at teams like the Browns, like I think Deshaun Watson's gonna have a rebound season compared to where he was like it was almost like his rookie year last year, where I feel like even if you stop Nick Chubb and then Jerome Ford, who I'm high on as well, um, I think the Browns will have enough of a passing game to complement what they do offensively. And I think the same thing with the Ravens. I obviously think the Bengals as well. And I can easily see the Steelers having that if Kenny Pickett develops how we think of that. So it's a tough call. But it's sound logic. Like I think Jeffrey Simmons is one of the most underrated defensive linemen on that team. And he really does a lot for that team. And then you have Danico Autry. And David Long on that team as well. So when you have a front seven that's as loaded as they are, and they're just hoping that Bud Dupree returns to form, and the rest of their defense shows up, they, like you said, they can beat anybody with defense and a running game. So why don't we jump to the offense and talk about a little bit more of like the problems we see or versus like players we're high on? Because when I look at their tight end, I think one guy that I saw really, I'm glad I picked him up in fantasy, but watching him like showed up down the line really gives me hope that he could actually be a feature receiving option in this end. And that's actually Chigo Okonkwo. I think he is like one of the better tight ends in the league that's not talked about enough. Would not go as far to say as like he's Waller, Kittle, Kelsey yet, or Andrews yet, but he's definitely can be the focal point of this offense as it's structured now when the player is keying on Henry. And then, like we alluded to, we're hoping Treylon Burks can give you an approximation of A.J. Brown, but I don't think he's as good as A.J. Brown. What are your thoughts on the rest of the squad?
Yeah, I think, again, like they have players that can be really good. I really like, Chiga Okonkwo. I put him I guess right under that tier of elite tight ends in the league. Obviously, Travis Kelce's on his own tier of eliteness, but him included with like George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller. Even though Darren Waller hasn't played as good as like the last 2 years. But anyways, there's like that category of tight end, and I think it's like Okonkwo, he's right under that of like that mix of players like like Dalton Schultz, I feel like falls under that. Like he has good game. He can be really good, but he isn't quite to that level of, I guess, just taking over a game that those elite tight ends have. And I think that he has the potential to, I guess, explode this upcoming season. We saw him play really good football last year, despite, again, horrible quarterback play from Malik Willis. But, I think everyone's comparing Treylon Burks to A.J. Brown, which I think while there is a lot of similarities in their game, there are differences. Like you said, I don't think they're not the same player. And so I feel like if people keep on comparing the two, I think people keep on being unsatisfied with Burks. But I do think that Burks can be a number one wide receiver. I mean, he has the build. He showed flashes last season. Obviously, he dealt with a lot of injury last season and Malik Willis last season. But
I can tell you're high on Malik Willis.
Is anyone high on Malik Willis? Like, name me one person who's like, oh man, Will Levis has got a tough road ahead of him. He's got Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis to fight for the quarterback spot. Like,
of course, John. Haven't you heard from the NFL draft? He was absolutely amazing. He's giving out to people. He's like doing all the service, and players love him. Dan Campbell loved him. Like, what do you not like about Malik Willis?
He's a good guy. He's a really nice guy. I don't think that's an issue. He just sucks. He's like Anthony Richardson from like Wish.com. Like that's what you got from like Malik Willis. I think he had one game maybe that he topped 100 yards in passing. I don't even know. Like, because I keep track during the season at least, I keep track of a lot of quarterback stats, and like I don't think he had a single good game, which is really disappointing because I was really hopeful for him. I thought that he could be a good quarterback. I think that there was, I guess, the structure around him to develop into a good quarterback. Obviously, why I think Will Levis this is a good spot for Will Levis in my opinion, but I guess he was a little too raw of a passer despite his crazy throws in the pre-draft process that people had him going like number 6 to the Raiders or something in that last year, which is still bonkers that people hyped him up that much. But I do think a lot of these guys with consistent quarterback play can step up. Obviously, Kyle Phillips is the guy I was really excited for last season, but I'm pretty sure he got hurt too, and then he fell victim of a specific quarterback that I can't remember the name of again. I don't know, but kind of moving beyond these skill position plays. I mean, I know you love Ty J. Spears, but I'm going to move past him. I think this is a pretty solid offensive line as well. Obviously, it's not the best offensive line in the league. I think there are like things they can do to improve this O-line, but when you got a guy like Derrick Henry who basically can overcome bad offensive line play, I think the best out of almost any running back in the league. I think that, if as long as you have him, you don't have to spend that much money or that much concern on the offensive line just because he is such a dynamic player for this team, and every team game plans and schemes for Derrick Henry.
Yeah, which is why I thought they made a lot of key additions with their offensive line. I like Dillard. I've always thought he was really good on the Eagles, and that was a good get for them. I love how they added Daniel Brunskill from the 49ers. He's also a really good lineman. They seem to churn out really good linemen every single year. I'm sure you as a Broncos fan will be so happy with Mike Belinci. Still can't get over that. But I find it interesting that the starting Skoronski at guard, he did really well as tackle when he played at Northwestern. I don't know too much about Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. Pretty sure that's French, and I can't pronounce that correctly. Or Aaron Brewer. So we'll see how they do. But I think it's only going to help Derrick Henry when you have healthy offensive linemen. And I think when you're trying to move on from the Taylor Lewan era, it can be very difficult. But I think they did a good job trying to replace him right now. Like you mentioned, I love Tajay Spears. I think even if you get 3 to 5 good years out of him, he's going to be really productive for this team. I think he could be a future back if Henry goes down. I'm not worried about the ACL so much because as is running back as a short-term, like career-wise, I still think he can make a lot of money in the NFL and be productive. We've seen lots of cases where running backs have moved past it. We've also seen like cases like Todd Gurley where running backs have struggled to move past injuries. I think to this point, if you see Tajay Spears like being able to cut and run, but the ACL like that he doesn't have, I think it's a good sign that the doctors gave him the clear he can play. So I think with that said, he's somebody I'm willing to put on my sleeper list as running backs. And if I'm getting him in the 13th, 14th round with these injuries concerns, I'm fine with it because like he's on an offense that's willing to run the ball. They have dedicated offensive line towards it. They'll need to be complementary with the weapons they have in order to make it work. Especially if you have a tight end or a wide receiver one who functions best after the catch. You need a running game to try and see the defense and really make that play action game work, the screen games work. Like really suck the linebackers in so you can get a conquer of the ball. So you need the pieces there. So King Henry, enough said. One of the best running backs in the league. He's going to win you your fantasy matchup like 2 or 3 times a year by just going outrageous for 200 yards at some point. Enough said about that. I don't think Tannehill's washed enough where like we're saying, oh, he's going to suck after 4 games in the season. He could still be productive and function in the offense. I think it'll be a little bit harder for him because he doesn't have the A.J. Brown talent to lean on. But functional offense here. We'll have to see how Kyle Phillips and Westbrook-Ikhine do. They had their moments. We'll see what's up with them. But a lot to like here.
Yeah, I see Tannehill throwing like mid 3,000 yards and then maybe like high 20s at best for, passing touchdowns. And I think that's it's not like the flashiest of numbers, but it's still
It works for their offense.
it works for the offense because again, Tannehill doesn't need to be the focal point. And I think him and Henry work really well with each other because I mean, I just look back at when the Titans had Marcus Mariota, like Henry was not playing that great of football for whatever reason. But then the second they switched in Tannehill, I even remember that season because I remember the Broncos played the Titans and they started out with Mariota and they shut down Derrick Henry. Henry had like less than like 3.5 yards per carry or something crazy like that. And I was super excited. I'm like, let's go Broncos. You can stop Derrick Henry. Yada, yada, yada. But then like a week or two later, they completely switched to Tannehill. And then that's when, Derrick Henry just took off and became the running back everybody wants on their fantasy football team. And so I think they're a really good complementary duo. I think they work together well. I think people forget that Tannehill back in the day was a first-round pick, Obviously, he suffered from injury and bad coaching. I think it was Adam Gase as his head coach, which we've all seen the mess that Adam Gase is. But
Yep, you and me both.
yeah, and so we kind of see that. And then the second, he goes to Tennessee, Tannehill lights it up and like he plays phenomenal football here. And so I think that he's not going to be an elite quarterback that you see in the rest of the AFC, but he fits his role perfectly, I think, in this team.
Absolutely. And I think it's just that passing aspect. They have enough pieces to have a functional passing attack where they have like two pieces like the defense really needs to key on, maybe one. We'll see how Burst does. But I think Tajay Spears can also function in the pass game as well if they need a third option and they're not happy with a Keenan and Phillips. So this is going to be play action heavy offense. It's going to be relying on whether the offensive line can block. But I think with the additions they've had, this can be a functional offense where they can have 7 wins. They could have 9 or 10 wins. I would not be surprised if they're in the playoffs. I just look at their passing ceiling, and there's not enough like variety where I'm like, the defense shuts down Derrick Henry. What are you going to do? That I think that those are questions that still need to be answered, and we'll see this upcoming season. Last depth chart part of the day, we're going to go through the defense and special teams aspect. You highlighted a lot in our preview where you absolutely love their front seven. I think one underrated piece or 2 underrated pieces they have really is Harold Landry and Azeez Al-Shahir. Al-Shahir was absolutely amazing for the Niners. I thought that like the Titans adding him was huge. It was huge. And I forget the linebacker they had on that team. I think maybe it was David Long. Maybe I could be wrong about that. But when he was on that team, he was they were absolutely like solid linebackers with like they always have these guys but they're not like Red Warners, but like they're good. And you can rely on them to like make the tackles, play fundamentally sound. And I think that's just the key of their defense. Very fundamentally sound.
Oh my gosh. What?
I take that bad? Damn.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I really like this front seven. Obviously that's why I had them winning 7 games. It's because they have a good front seven. No. It is because the 7 is good to win 7. But anyways, I do think the biggest weakness is, I guess, pass coverage as a whole. I mean, obviously their linebackers aren't too bad in coverage, but I mean, I look at their secondary in particular where, I mean, you got good guys. I mean, Roger McCreary, Christian Fulton, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Caleb Farley, like they all are names, at least a slightly nuanced NFL fan would know and like understand, but I feel like these guys are good as like good for covering like number 2 and 3 receivers at best, which is the big concern with this. And it's like when you go and are going after, there's like an elite 1 or 2 receivers on a team, which most NFL teams do have nowadays. It's really hard for this to keep up. Obviously, Kevin Byard, he's might be the best player on this defense, but
absolutely, Close to Simmons.
Yeah.
Close to Simmons.
Yeah, I feel like you could either argue Simmons or Landry as being like the other two best players on this defense, but I feel like he's a standout in the secondary, but you look at the rest of the pieces and it's like when they go against what's their schedule again? Here.
I can pull it up.
Yeah.
They're facing the Chargers and the Bengals and the Ravens within the first 6 weeks.
Yeah,
and
but yeah,
the Browns.
But it's like sure you have like Kevin Byard, right? Who can guard or he can stop like maybe like one or two like over the top or like throughout the middle type guys, but you know when you're going against the Chargers, you got Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams, you got Quentin Johnson. Yeah, you have him, and then out of the backfield you have Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, who's been hit or miss, but is a relatively shifty tight end for all things said. But you have like all those pieces, and it's like, can the Titans guard those guys? With the Browns, you have Amari Cooper, you got Elijah Moore, you got Cedric Tillman, you got David Bell, you got a bunch of guys that can be good, and obviously I think that they do have positions, I guess, to guard guys like David Bell, but I feel like you look down this list of their schedule, and I mean, like looking down to the Seahawks, I'm like, how are they going to guard the Seahawks 3 receivers? You know, it's like, sure, they can stop Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker for the game, but, you know, it's like, who's covering JSN? Like, who's going to stop him? And you put your best guy on JSN, well, you got DK on the outside, you got Tyler Lockett who can kill you. Like, and so I think that a lot of it's a really big hole in their defense. I know they've tried addressing it over the past couple seasons, but I feel like they're yet to hit on, I guess, their it guy that, you know, every team wants at least at a cornerback position. I mean, you look at the Saints, they got Marshawn Lattimore, and they, you know, and then like Paula Debo, he even is a pretty solid number 2 option to have there. Chargers obviously have Derwin James, who's a safety, kind of like how the Titans have it, but I do believe that their rest of their secondary and just the defense as a whole is a lot more complete, you know? And I feel like just going down like the list of elite teams in the league, you do see a lot more, I guess, more really good players in the secondary to make up for whatever inefficiencies the defense may have.
Yeah, and I think as a result, they'll have to play a lot more cover 4, cover 2, the 2 safeties back. We saw it a lot in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the weakness on this defense would be Armani Hooker. He's had a lot of good moments, but I think you can get got with him. And especially like you didn't even mention like the Ravens and the Bengals, and like just the frequency, even the Dolphins, just the frequency of like 2 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers that can really like beat a defense now, especially in the AFC, is extremely tough. And I think it's part of the reason why we have them lower, like where we have them as 7 or 10, where we're just like, this is a really good team, but they have to win in a specific way, where they have to win with ball control, where the score is tight, when they're stopping the run, and they're running it down your throat, and they have the ball enough times. Well, what are you going to do when you're down 14 and down 21? I think that's the major weakness of this team. And I think it's something they definitely have to address if they want to be in that top echelon of teams.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, there's like so little they need to do, but it's like such a big impact that it makes it really hard for this Titans team. Just like, imagine this defense with a guy like, you know, Jalen Ramsey, a guy like Sauce Gardner, a guy like Pat Surtain. Like, I feel like
they'd be top.
A guy like, their defense goes from like really good, like, you know, maybe slightly above average to a potential top 5 defense in the league just immediately, because then you have, you know, your backup or your other quarterbacks on the team. You know, you got Roger McCreary, Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley, Sharp Murphy Button. You can have all those guys guard the number 2 and the number 3, which I do think that they can excel at, which then completely negates, I guess, offenses, like off different offensive strategies. But until they get that it guy on their team, then I feel like their secondary is just a little too middling to find consistent success throughout the season. Even if they do, you know, on an off week, shut down like the Bengals for whatever reason, but it's obviously not sustainable. And so I hope that that's what they kind of invest in the future, or at least hope to develop Caleb Farley for something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So who knows? Like when they developed like the Tampa Bay defense, they technically didn't have like a number one corner unless you call I think Carlton Davis is on that level, and they had a lot of success with that. It remains to be seen um, where their level of defense will be on the same level as that Tampa Bay defense. They certainly have the capabilities to,
Mm-hmm.
but in the modern day passing game, with all these teams and the level of wide receiver play, everybody's found the answers to cover 2, cover 4 now. So you can't rely on that primarily. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion on the AFC South. I certainly did. Getting to know what Coruscant's thoughts were on the new rookie QBs and their situations, what we think about the Jaguars and their upside. We definitely think they're the team to beat in this conference. But by no means is this set in stone. After all, we don't know where Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins are going to land, and their landing spots can change completely how the output's going to look because of their status as NFL veterans with star capabilities. And if you guys haven't been following us on the Instagram, you can follow us at amon.odd.mission. For those listening on Spotify, we'll have this in the show notes for you. So you can go ahead and give us a follow. Let us know what you like. If you're on the YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment to say what we did well, what we could work on. And like Corsian said, job well done, guys. You've been faithful listeners, and we hope to keep churning out these videos week by week, continuing with our NFL updates. A lot to look forward to. With that, peace out.
Peace.